Welcome Zenkaikon 2024 to Batman versus Just Us. Thank you everyone who waited outside and thank you for joining me today. I need you to know that you will not enjoy this lecture. Because there is no change without struggle and there's no change without challenge. I'm Karl, Uncle Yo Custer, licensed master social worker. I operate out of New York State. I am a trauma-informed anime therapist to my clients and a geek culture translator to their parents. And to quote my research professor, Dr. Nafiz Alam, there are no safe spaces anymore. There are only brave spaces. Safe spaces create cowards and conservative think tanks. Brave spaces get people to read children's stories at libraries. Brave spaces become parades. Brave spaces improve communities. And to quote my friend who has the greatest job in the world as a mother, anyone who was brave was scared. We're going to talk today about poverty, the criminal justice system, and of course, Batman, because I'm white. I can't not. Batman's awesome. You're going to learn today that poverty, much like wealth, is inherited and accumulated due to laws and policies informing banks and employers and law enforcement who to treat and how to treat you and your family. Behaviors and laws are choices that get turned into policies, which are written by people who have changeable beliefs and experiences. The next 70-ish minutes are going to be something like a longer Last Week Tonight with John Oliver episode, and we're going to use real-life statistics in a fictional city called Gotham. We're going to be asking the question, who can really reduce crime in Gotham City? Batman or the mask he wears, Bruce Wayne? Most of you already know very clearly the answer to this question. Who can actually reduce crime? Because Batman is a fantasy. In reality, if you want to fight crime and reduce prison populations, reduce the amount of social fear that's in a community, you invest in public health care. You invest in early child care, education, hospitals, transportation for your elderly, benefits, streamline those. Bruce Wayne could end poverty and reduce crime and save the city. What he chooses to do every year since the 1930s is buy a custom stealth bomber shaped like his favorite hat. Who does that help? Especially if you're driving a stealth bomber through all of these skyscrapers of Gotham City. That is noise violence. But it's fine. My helmet has earbuds. This isn't about you. Crime! To quote Nelson Mandela, overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. I had many ideas to start this panel off and countless angles that I could approach from. Eventually, like the topic of Batman versus social worker, bat caves and crime alleys, billionaire versus society, how Batman is robbing children of their future. A deeper cut than Snyder's. I surrendered on focusing on poverty versus wealth, job creation, and social services. And so today, these are going to be the bigger topics that we're going to talk about and the many lessons that we'll be pulling from and gleaning as we go along. But I want to talk first about billionaires. Understand, this lecture came from a single statistic I read online last year at the end of last Zenkaikon that Batman's wealth was once estimated to be $9 billion. Sometimes we forget the big difference between a million and a billion. So to count a million seconds, you need 12 days. To count to a billion, you need 31 years. There's a great big distance on that. And so when Bruce Wayne is worth $9 billion, I thought that doesn't sit right. Because you know who else has $9 billion? The CEO of Chick-fil-A. He's worth the same amount as Batman. We have too many people worth more than Batman to not have a real-life Batman. What are we doing with ourselves? I understand Bruce Wayne must have $9 billion reported to cover up the insane amounts of money invested in side hobbies, shuffled off into shell corporations, probably somewhere in the Cayman Islands and or Ireland, you're not getting off for this, offshore accounts, hidden nonprofits that run in orphanages, and the banana stand he keeps in Damien's closet. But yes, Batman, the ultimate American superhero. Batman, the self-made hero, the guy on the side of darkness who enforces the light using only his wits and technology. He triumphs over impossible odds using the power of his trust fund. For a guy so obsessed with justice, why does he never go to court for property damage, or personal injury, or breaking and entering, or coercion, or illegally parking the Batmobile, or flying a stealth bomber through residential areas, or planting evidence? Is he just the ultimate cop's fantasy? The biggest problem with the example that Batman presents is it's okay to break the law as long as I do it. Good job, Nixon. No wonder criminals have to fight Batman. He's never even gotten a parking ticket. You can't hold him accountable by legal means. This is how, in some cases, superheroes can actually do more collateral harm than justice and public good. Batman's main superpower is, of course, money. Yeah, it's a superpower, inherited wealth, which brings him unlimited health care, personal time to train and study chemistry and criminology and sociology and tinker in the Batcave and yeah, carve out the Batcave! You cannot study ninjutsu, build a stealth bomber, the Batplane and the Batcycle and the Bat jet ski while working 9 to 5 at a Starbucks. You don't have that much time as a human being, so we've all seen the Batcave in movies and comics and the animated series, and there's no way one dude built that, ran the electricity for the lights, and set up all of the lit displays and the costumes, built the Bat computer, put in an elevator and a rising platform and all of the extra security for the Batmobile. There are stairs in the, there are contractors and hush money in the development of the Batcave. There are contractors who have been sworn to secrecy, lest Alfred break their legs. Let's break apart the original myth of what the self-made billionaire is. Batman doesn't exist in our world, but billionaires definitely do. And where do they come from? Well, your daddy or his daddy didn't pay the people who worked for him what they were owed, and now that money is yours. Now, to be fair, that is obviously like a gross comical reduction over very complicated economic issues. But there is a very legitimate reason to have billionaires in a society. And it boils down to one word. Wah, wah, I want it. And we get it. That's the thing, the myth of the self-made billionaires, because billionaires, they build companies that produce a product. Rockefeller laid out transportation that allowed manifest destiny. He laid out train tracks accessing the entirety of the continent. Companies that generally start with a huge investment and tax breaks from big governments. National investments gave Tesla $800 million of our tax dollars to convert the entire automotive industry from gas to electric. It starts with a great big old investment from us. State incentives all the time, and an incentive like if you build here and you bring your factory down here, create a bunch of jobs, we'll reduce what we take from you over the next couple of years. Score, I'll do it, I'll choose it. We do it micro all the time, downstairs in dealers' rooms and artist alleys, State incentives are the things that keep oil companies planted in Texas. They invest in multiple streams of revenue, and they start to combine them. They corner markets on goods and services. They cut down spending costs, and they buy out successful competitors. For example, when Facebook bought WeChat was only estimated a couple $1 billion. They were bought out for something like 8 to 12 billion and have since expanded since then. But when you can just casually create something like that, some systems break down. Billionaires buy and own the land that raises your crops, the machines that collect and process the crops into breakfast cereal, and they set the prices for those cereals. It's one thing for one person to own the most successful restaurant in town. That's great. That must mean they have good food, good customer service. It's another thing when that same person owns every restaurant in town, or every building in the city, or every street where everyone uses. And I tend to believe that freedom means options. Don't you? If you don't have options, you're stuck with whomever wants to set those rules. Now, I want to break down something a little bit about millions and billionaires. As of 2022, there are 59.4 million millionaires in the world. That's the population of Italy and South Africa. As of 2022, there are 3,200 billionaires. That's up from 600 from 2021. That number never goes down. So there's about 1,600 mofos that need to get Christmas caroled. Hard. They need to run around. What day is every day afterward? Not just buy the goose, but also buy the butcher shop, buy out the building that Bob Cratchit and his family owns and operates. Help the micro, save the macro, Mr. Wayne. Here's a fun fact on home ownership is 90% of millionaires work in real estate investment. They work in building houses, which is kind of like a critical safety measure. It's kind of like a critical thing about being human is having your place. And when you privatize that out and you give that out and over, every time a private company takes over a publicly owned building, rents go up, quality of living goes down, foreclosures and people getting kicked out on the street and evictions always seem to double. Always seem to double. When you work in real estate and you just hold and hoard like smog, but with a housing project, you don't make products or good for services. Just the bare minimum of being a safe human being in the world is yours to flip. And to quote Matthew Desmond's book, Poverty by America, since 1979, the bottom 90% of our population saw an annual earning gain of about 24%, while the top 1% saw what they had doubled. So if you were at the bottom, you saw 24% higher. If you had $100 to your name in 1980, you now have $120 today, which gets you what? Half of the Chipotle menu. Not a house. One last rant about billionaires, and this is one of my favorite ones. In November of 2022, Mr. Jeff Bezos, seen here stealing 40 cakes, gave Dolly Parton $100 million, yes, because the Dolly Parton Foundation, she has spent her whole life running charities, pushing and promoting and pimping literature to all of the Southeast and the West, giving children the start of literacy. What he could have done alternatively with $100 million, this is the crazy part, he could have gone to any one of the Amazon warehouses, which has an estimate of like 1,500 employees, and given each of them carte blanche, either equal to or greater than a year's wage. He could have given 1,500 people in one Amazon, you guys are the best working warehouse, here is $66K. He could have done this in 2022 over 1,000 times and still been a billionaire. Pet projects. He already has a vehicle shaped like the top of his head that he launched into space. How long before this happens? That's the difference between wealth and income. Income is what you report on your taxes. Income is the paper check that you get. This is the number worth your time and hours of work. Wealth is kind of fluid. Your house that you just bought goes up in value sometimes over the year until the roof collapses. The car that you just financed and bought, as soon as you drive it off the lot, collapses in price and value because it's now touched the thing that we're giving away at the charity auction. What kind of is wealth? And we've kind of used that to protect people, such as royal families, etc., or casts of, say, Succession, over and over. But of course, the people from Succession are just a fiction. We don't have people like that in America today. We only have 3,200 of them across the whole world. Which brings to the question, are there good billionaires? Well, yes. I want to introduce to a Floridian billionaire, Harris Rosen. Now, this is where the social worker has to attack, because if you feed and support the household, the micro, the single family and the single client, it expands to the whole neighborhood. So here's the deal. He is the founder of the Rosen Hotels. Tangelo Park is a neighborhood, I think, just north of Orlando. And for the last few years, his company and charity have bought out homes that have renovated the bottom levels of homes to turn them into schools so that teachers and assistants have 6 to 8 kids in one classroom. That kind of direct focus and empowerment gives those kids chances to, this is the best part of the foundation, pay for their college for free. So if you live in Tangelo Park, the Rosen Foundation has an application where you can go to any university in the state of Florida for free. We have found over generations, investing in education is the single greatest step to inherited generational wealth. The investment you put into education, and ideally not come out burdened under college debt, which we talk about later in deep Batcave level debt, promotes and pimps out and gives the chance to rise. Now, the majority of home owners and people who ran the households in Tangelo Park, single women of color, single mothers. Knowing that there was round-the-clock care for their kids, they were able to either go back to school, finish out their GED, get their master's, or take on part-time work to found and fund the household over generations that builds wealth. Billionaires, they do get a lot of bad rap, I'm not gonna lie. They're an easy scapegoat. The punchline to every Netflix documentary, it's the Koch brothers. But if we incentivize pumping money back into the community, even billionaires can be trained to make better choices than planes shaped like their heads. The effects of being the working broke, which I will speak to personally, having been for the last 9 months, the working broke. You live paycheck to paycheck. It takes the same mental bandwidth and strain and does the same harm to your memory, cognitive functioning, emotional regulation as losing a night of sleep. But when you're broke, you lose that the rest of your life. Please don't let the car break down this time. Please don't let my kid get sick. Please don't let me have to take them to a doctor and lose this Friday shift. I need this Friday shift. That takes away. I would say, as a therapist, mindfulness is really quaint in a safe space. Cash solves problems, Mr. Wayne. So let's talk about Batman's actual effect on Gotham City. When one man is given free reign over a city, he can commit whatever crime he kind of wants without consequence. Crimes that the public ends up paying for. I mentioned property damage earlier. This is kind of the cost of vigilantism. What we never talk about in the comics is the fact that Batman isn't just beating up criminals, he's beating up tax-paying citizens who actually have rights that seem to get thrown away because someone in a mask yelled, "My parents are dead!" Citizens who don't have a choice because they are the working broke, but to take that weird midnight job on the docks, unloading kryptonite bullets and shipping them to Metropolis, or pumping in more Bane's venom into the local school system just to make ends meet. The consequences of getting your ass kicked by Batman, no, I'm sorry, I should reframe that for insurance purposes. The consequences of involuntary negative outcome encounters with mass vigilantism. Ding! I promise you, Blue Cross Blue Shield still won't cover it! Especially not Cigna. Every negative impact costs out-of-pocket hospital care. That counts against most health insurance. Where did the black eye come from? Why is Daddy walking with a limp? Well, late night he had to take another job, and someone dressed as a bat tackled him. Here's the thing, from micro to macro, every day job that pays better keeps employees from needing to participate in get-rich-quick schemes. We'll talk about the gig economy in a little bit, but let me turn this over to you guys. Who has ever called out of work or school because they were sick? In the last 6 years, we had a pandemic. Okay, so just a nod. That's like 75% of the audience. Was it restful, your day off, when you were sick and worried about what you were missing? Did you feel guilty about taking time off? Was it actually easy? Oh, I seem to not be hearing yeses. Did you actually recover? Were there consequences when you came back? That doesn't seem like a sound, safe system to be a part of. And that's the thing, is superheroes are reactive versus proactive. Proactive policies don't show immediate results because they're not as sexy and scary. They don't televise as well. And remember, Batman's a fantasy, and I love that fantasy too. I'm still going to read Batman comics. But if we really want to see people who claim to be super being heroes, we can be proactive with that. Superhero narratives are completely reactive. We are the Avengers. We avenge a wrong. Spider-Man, someone took my purse. Did that person need to take a purse? Who is he feeding at home? What life-saving medication or insulin can he not afford that he needs to tackle someone and take their purse? Or maybe their social security card, because it's the only guaranteed payment you're going to find in New York City. The last time superheroes were proactive is a book called Squadron Supreme. Anyone ever read Squadron Supreme, the book that inspired Watchmen? You know what they did to keep the world safe then. That's another lecture for another day. Or how about the end of The Dark Knight, where one billionaire taps every phone in the city to find the Joker? No oversight, no consequence. He just wanted to find his crime boyfriend. For me, I will never forget the episode of Batman the Animated Series where Nightwing explains to Robin why he quit being Batman's partner. It's in a flashback. Nightwing talks about how older Robin himself and Batman crash into a potential goon's house. And Batman's got him up against the walls. I'm looking for, insert your villain here. You've got information that I need. And we see through Robin's reaction as the camera pans around, his wife and children are huddled in fear in a corner. And what we see on Robin's, soon-to-be Nightwing's realization face is Batman feels entitled to do this. Batman feels entitled to violate the safety of someone's home in front of their loved ones, family, and children to get an answer right then and there. And so every day that comes up after that emotional trauma, when those kids overreact because home is not safe, the Batman is going to take away mom and dad, and then they have to call out of work or get into somewhere else, they will get further punished for that. Has never left me. And that's another reason I loved to see that side of Batman, the animated series. I mean, who does Batman think he is? A cop in a red state? Or a cop in a black neighborhood in a blue city? Or moving on. Remember, no safe spaces, only brave spaces. I am in here with you. I was out there with you marching in BLM, and I will do it again for fair wages, and I will do it again. This is why I want to take some time and diffuse. Let's do the Spider-Man rant, because again, all crime and all superheroes are completely reactionary, okay? They never keep tabs on Magneto or Apocalypse. Are you building another underground missile silo? No, okay. He built it again! Oh, let's go punch him in his missile silo. Here's the thing. Spider-Man swings through New York City, practically barefoot, touching every surface from subway underpasses to the sidewalk where all gum, pigeon droppings, and broken Heineken bottles litter everywhere. He is sticking to walls, to windows. He is sticking to hotels. He's touching taxis. Spider-Man stinks. He wears the same outfit under his regular clothes. He is a teenager most of the time. There are no air holes. Those are his gym clothes. Sticky gym clothes. Do you think he's washing them every day? Do you think he has a closet full of backups? He's a broke teenager and a college student with a part-time job photographing himself at the Daily Bugle, the original Marvel OnlyFans? I don't think so. Give me more pictures of Spider-Man from behind. You're really hyper-fixated on that. It's February, I need more pictures of Spider-Man. Y'all know he's broke. He doesn't have a dresser full of backups. He's Spider-Man. He's broke. That's why we like him. Has anyone ever worn the same cosplay the whole weekend at the con? You might not want to show people that. If you raise your arm, we'll smell and we'll know. The only thing that's why so many versions of Spider-Man have webbing in the armpits. That's how often he washes it. So I'm telling you, Spider-Man smells bad, except Miles Morales, who probably just smells like Axe body spray to cover up the weed. But if you're in a building and it's on fire, and Spider-Man lands, boom, I'll swing you to safety. Nah, B, I'm good. What are we, 26 stories up? I'm gonna jump. Just can you do the hammock web thing? Oh my God, man, close your legs. What are you doing? I'm so flexible. I'm gonna jump. Spider-Man isn't even paid to save lives. It's a hobby. Poverty strikes suddenly. It strikes faster than Batman, and it does far more damage to us in the long run when we can't save up for anything. An injury at work while driving an Uber? Too bad. Uber owns the car. They don't owe you health insurance. You're a paid member of the gig economy. Maternity or paternity leave? Get back on the grill. Had baby? That's your choice. That's your problem. We're not helping with that. Testing positive for COVID over the last 3 years. Has anyone had to lose 5 days until they tested negative again? Yeah, we are losing those coverages very quickly. But we could have kept them. The majority of Americans are paying 50% of their paycheck toward their rent because rent prices always go up, wages don't. That's a problem in the wealthiest nation in world history. And so according to the Office of Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation, these are the rates of income your household must achieve in order to qualify for federal poverty assistance. Yes, believe it or not, you have national and state supplementary programs that can help pull you temporarily out of poverty, okay? And this is probably helpful because between 1985 and 2020, so what, 45 years, rent increased by 149% while income increased 35%. That's helpful. That helps generational wealth. That saves nothing and no one. Because believe it or not, we have offers and emergency programs. If you don't know this, it's called TANF, or Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. Families of 3 received an average of $500 a month. I'm sorry, if rent increased 149%, what is $500 a month gonna really cover? Is that groceries for the month? Is that rent for the month? I don't think so. Is that just cable and electric and maybe a Netflix or two? In 2020, out of the thousands of people who filed, guess how many TANF cases were actually filed and completed? There's a 2 in it. 23%. 23% out of the countless people who lost income and livelihood from the pandemic. We need to shore up these services. We also have SNAP. It used to be called food stamps, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program run by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the ones who tell you, you should probably drink like 5 glasses of milk and 11 servings of bread a day. Had a bowl of pasta, now I have 10 more. Thank you, grain industry. If you struggle for food, apply for SNAP. It's that easy. Assuming your local grocery store accepts EBT cards, which they have the right to refuse, and assuming your place even has fresh produce to begin with, and assuming you don't live in an urban environment that is a food desert where your only fresh food is canned ravioli at a corner bodega. Where is the nearest lunch of parsley? Get a bag of potatoes. To what? To the homeless shelter I'm in? Who's got an oven and an air fryer? Thanks. This happens far too frequently. If applying for aid takes so much time out of your work day or free time, if it requires weeks of bureaucratic red tape just to see if you're who you say you are and provides so little help, people barely get out of poverty. And then they get dropped right back down into struggling. It is intentionally a confusing and unhelpful system. We've let it get this way. This was a choice. If you want to fight crime, you kill poverty in the cradle one of 2 ways: direct cash payments, such as a universal basic income, or like Social Security, which is a big blank check that you get for reaching 65. No questions. Here it is. Enjoy your iPad. You've worked hard for this. By the way, the TANF program, its yearly budget, $16.5 billion, 1.5 Bruce Waynes. The U.S. military budget, slightly higher. Don't you think? Don't you think you could take like 2 here and go whoop? We never do that. We never think to do that. Let's talk about it. Who sees Pennsylvania up there? Pennsylvania. Okay, the hourly wage required to afford a two-bedroom rental home across the state, this is across the whole state, averaged out in Pennsylvania, $20 an hour. Okay, anyone work at the Wawa or Sheetz making $20 an hour or starting at $20 an hour? I'm seeing very few nods. Well, isn't that interesting? A startling fact about New York City, after the COVID-19 subsidies were lifted, these were the things that extended unemployment insurance, which saved my life, or increased unemployment insurance. Not only that, but also helping to subsidize taking work off for getting sick. How many citizens of New York City were put into or back into poverty? I'll give you a hint. Let's Price is Right this. There's a 6 in that number. 6%? Anyone else have any other guesses? 60%. Okay, how many New Yorkers were put back into poverty after the COVID-19 assistance were 56%? Over half of 8 million people, over 4 million people were back in the poverty line. So if you're building a program that really doesn't help, if you're treating a shark bite with mindfulness and a Band-Aid, it requires a shift in the system, or at least some more funding. Don't you think, Mr. Wayne? Don't you think? Do you really need 6 different batarangs on your belt? Do you really need shark repellent? It's a freshwater bay you live next to, Mr. Wayne. I want to talk about the fight over COVID-19 during the fight for a $15 minimum wage. $15. If it matched inflation, it actually would have been $25, should be the national minimum wage. Here's how the argument went. We're gonna let kids who flip burgers make the same amount of money as EMTs. They have the same... Shut your white mouth. What are you talking about? EMTs made $15 an hour in New York City during a 2.5-year pandemic. The first people who staunched the bleeding after a school shooting, the first people who picked up a fallen elderly person living by themselves, the first person to administer first aid to a child made $15 an hour. The part-time job is no longer a viable option for youth or older adults. My stepfather flipped burgers on the beach for one summer and paid for college every semester that way. Do you know how many full-time U.S. employees use part-time work to subsidize their income? You work full-time, you work 40 hours a week, and you still take up something on the weekends or at night. How many Americans are doing that? 89%? Do I have any higher or lower guesses? 89, that's pretty good. 75. 85%. Private practice. It just went up to 86 over the weekend? Well, here's the thing, but here's the thing. The economy is doing so good. The numbers are good. Look at all the jobs. If one single mother is working 3 part-time jobs and is still not putting food on the table, you have to ask yourself, are you the good guys? Yeah, the answer is we could be, we should be, we deserve to be. So shame on you, shame on us. The wealthiest nation in world history, the most successful arms dealer, because that's all we export, Marvel movies and bullets. And we always seem to forget we're the most wealthy nation in world history when it comes to the people that made you that money. Businesses' profits have never been higher. McDonald's profits, extras after paying the whole maintenance, is always in the billions. Year after year, they could have always afforded $15 an hour. They could afford $25 and health care easily. And the Joker could start taking Prozac and olanzapine. But that's a conversation Batman's not ready to have. When you have to work to survive, you take crappy jobs and you take crappy deals because they run the house that you're in. Soon as you walk into that franchised restaurant, you operate by their rules, their input, and you don't get to have a second opinion, or if you're a young kid, an informed decision. Most of us going into college took on a hefty weight. The government will pay it and will later pay it back. We really know what we were stepping into. And you put up with their rules. So you have to put up with the scarecrow backslapping you upside the head and calling you an ingrate, because it's his operation, his rules. Or you have to put up with the Joker asking you to smell his lapel. Does it smell anything like chloroform? That's the joke. Or your retail manager cutting back hours because, God forbid, you take a sick day. Most of us are going to get sick in this building, whether we like it or not. I'm fighting it with Halls, and I'm fighting it with fresh water, and I'm running low on water. Here's the thing. When you are broke, you sleep less. You are sicker for more often and for longer. You hold off doing preventative doctor's visits until it's too late. You can't take that day off work. Maybe the tooth pain goes away. Oh, I hope this passes. You turn to supplements for more energy. Then you're doing harder stuff to relieve the pain. You can't take a day or a shift away from work, and suddenly you're working the docks at midnight on half a bottle of Oxytocin and 5 Red Bulls just to give your kid something, and a guy dressed as a bat punches out your teeth. Good luck getting dental care in the US and having insurance cover this. I fell at work. You fell on what? A Kevlar-coated chainmail fist? About 30 times. Did this happen on your lunch break? What if we prioritized other crimes besides drug possession and women seeking reproductive rights? You see, every dollar that we give to the IRS, Internal Revenue Services, gives back $7 on average to fund public services, like investments, like roads, like a public option for healthcare. But because we have gutted the oversight and investigation committees of the IRS, they cannot target the Sacklers, or the Kochs, or the Bezoses, or the Waynes, or the Luthors. They only have the budget to target smaller companies, mom and pop shops. The IRS needs a strong detective. The IRS needs Batman. Or at least the Question. Thank you for both of those. Otherwise, the only crime that police can chase down is reactive, and it's crimes such as punishing being broke. Outside of this convention center, there are at least half a dozen homeless, and the numbers seem to have grown in the last 4 years. What else is parked outside on the sidewalk? A police vehicle. Moving along. We don't want to see it. We don't have to see it. In Waco, Texas, it is illegal to take food out of public garbage cans, and it is illegal to beg. If you're caught begging from an undercover cop, you're broke. You go to prison. You go to jail. It is illegal to assert your dignity as a person to ask for food, for you or for anyone else. We have shamed asking for help. Remember, it's cheaper and sells more newspapers to instill fear about your neighbor than to build entitlement programs and safety nets. This is why when you look at life expectancy, rates of poverty, education, happiness, opportunity, where does the US fall internationally across all the other developed nations? You know, we are the wealthiest. You know, we're at least the top 5. The top 10. When we look at life expectancy, when we look at aspirations, we're 27th as of 2022, and that number only gets bigger among the so-called developed countries. So perhaps instead of the default cultural dialogue being work harder till you own a house, let's do like Batman. Let's judo flip those expectations on poverty on its head. Let me take you to a place called Salt Lake City, Utah. In 2007, the city of Salt Lake City, Utah removed 2,000 veterans, homeless veterans from the streets, and they built a micro housing village and a bus that ran to and from said micro village. They gave homeless veterans who already had benefits coming in and struggling to find them because they didn't have an address to deliver those benefits, they set up 2,000 people and pulled them off the streets. Not all of the homeless, but they got all 2,000 off the street by giving housing first. What did this do? This saved the city a third of the budget on EMTs and policing. Because it's one thing to just have someone be taken into the hospital and dropped off. It's another when you give them a door they can lock, or a bed that's not a pile of newspapers and cardboards. What happened? What happened? They gave homeless veterans safety. They didn't need meth to stay up for days on end. They got to sleep. They slept better. They communed with each other. They applied for jobs. They applied and got most of their benefits back because they had a place where the mail service could find them. Many of them sobered up and felt like dignified Americans again. Imagine that. Macro policies enhance enough micro systems, help the community, help the individual. It goes back into the community. When you invest in the community, you strengthen the community. And to quote George Carlin, because I always do, we don't need homes. A home is a concept. We need houses. We need windows and doors that lock. And to be fair, this worked for Salt Lake City because they are one very wealthy city, a very homogeneous population. They look a lot like this. It's a very religious adjacent. So if you get one leader to believe in it, you get all the leaders to believe in it, and it was only 2,000 out of the 6 that they had on the streets. It was a small project, but it proved that it can work. They got veterans assistance, so a small population of overall homeless got off the streets, rather than the 93,000 homeless that we had on the streets of New York City last November, 6 months ago. We counted 2023, 93,000. Guess how many were children? 17 and under. You say half? Okay. Anyone have another guess? 63%. Okay. Okay. 33%. 33,000. 33,000 potential cases to be called on and out by a Karen to be arrested for jumping the subway to try and get a doctor. Another 33,000 that just could have used a house. That is the reality. And that is the one I am fighting and I will punch against. Why couldn't they just be homeless in Alabama? At least the children could have, gotten jobs mopping floors at slaughterhouses overnight. Like they do. Here's the thing about Gotham City. I think it's the ultimate gig economy because in all my years of consuming Batman media, there are 4 jobs in Gotham City. There are 4 jobs. There are bank tellers who are about to be robbed by the Joker. There are security guards about to be knocked out by Catwoman. There are caterers about to be knocked out by the Joker. And there are goons. It just seems to strike me that everyone in Gotham City is working 2 or 3 jobs. Oh, thank goodness, 4 o'clock. Oh, I have about an hour. I can grab something from Chipotle, and then I've got a midnight meeting on the docks with Bane. Let's go with this. Oh, hey, aren't we seeing each other tomorrow at the catering gig? Yeah. This is a holdup. I know. Hashtag Joker Bros. It seems to be the ultimate gig economy. Let's talk about the gig economy. There's no generational wealth. It's just Band-Aids on bleeding financial needs. The path to saving or homeownership is not going to be there unless you're willing to put 60, 70 hours in an Uber in a major city, and instead of public restrooms, which in New York it averages about 1 per 100,000 people, don't complain when you just find plastic bottles full of pee along the sidewalks, because that becomes your bathroom. Your house is your workspace. We saw this lead to burnout in the pandemic. If we know you're home, why don't you just work extra overtime? It doesn't matter that your kids are also home too. We know you're home. Twitch. And hand out and thank you to the Twitch streamers who made it through the pandemic. But the great part about a gig economy, they're not going to take money out of your paycheck for something like retirement or to supplement your healthcare fund. You get all that money up front, which is great because the cost of healthcare never seems to go down. It's only Batman grappling hook. Whee! That's the price of taking care of yourself. Out of the 750,000 employees that Apple has, 750,000 worldwide. These are programmers, these are salespeople. How many of them actually work for Apple? Is it 6 in it? Okay, 63,000 is a lot of people spread across the entire world, they subsidize it. And that's been a big part of the gig economy is rather than taking on an employee and giving them full benefits, they let a third person give them slightly less benefits and put on probation for 6 months or so. You're still doing all of the regular work for this company. You're just getting less. Yay! Millennials, we have been the victim of the gig economy, haven't we? This was caused by some of our policies like NAFTA in the 90s, and for the past 20 years, we graduated from college knowing there were no steady pension-paying jobs, and we knew we would not afford a house. It's become a running joke now because of all the avocado toast. It had nothing to do with the fact that wages are falling behind the rise of rent and cost of living. We saw this, remember when eggs went to like $5? Oh, everyone was sad. That's gonna keep effing happening. We don't need jobs. We have internships, another word for modern slavery, free labor, and digital fascism, which is also social media influencing. You do not own the website or the space. You own your little thing, and however many views you make, that goes back to the people who own the servers. Yay! Sociologist Gerald Davis wrote, boomers had careers. Gen X had jobs. We complete tasks, and we're getting automated out of that. Here's the thing. Let the goons unionize. Right now, many employers operate like the Joker did in the film The Dark Knight. Work for me on the terms I set. I want half, or I'll make this pencil disappear. That's your vision care. Currently, only 6% of Americans even belong to a union. That conversation is changing. We are fighting back, we are demanding, and as we should. The whole point of this panel is know what you're getting and know that you deserve more. And know that the person next to you who you don't even know deserves more too. If the temporary employees of Batman villains, such as Ra's al Ghul, or the Riddler, or Two-Face, or Mr. Freeze, or the Joker, or the Penguin, unionized, they could negotiate life-saving improvements at the workplace. Look at how cold those MFers are on the left. They're wearing 3 separate outfits. That's ridiculous. They're inside. They could have, let's have some fun thought experiments. Okay, bargaining power, consistent, transparent, higher wages. Firefly's only gonna hire me for this. You know, Mr. Freeze is offering $5 more. I'm gonna take that, boss. Representation. You could start putting away for retirement, dental, insurance packages, or community. They could have focus groups like frequent head trauma support groups, scarecrow, knockout gas survivors, venom addicts, etc., etc. Protection from unfair dismissals. You sold me out to the bat, you're out. The union says otherwise, chief. Laundry covered, you know, for the bloodstains. It's necessary. Overtime, healthcare, potentially dental could be a big thing, because that's the thing. They could all talk about it. Verbalize what you're making and who isn't. Because you know what breeds in silence? Voldemort did. You know what bred in silence? All the literature and all the warnings that you've gotten from any literature point from 1940 onward. You could sit around with your fellow goons. You work for Two-Face? Oh my gosh, that guy's a lawyer who became a supervillain, which I always assumed or was like redundant. You ever work for a Ra's al Ghul? So much on-the-job ninja training. He's cruddy health benefits. He gets the Lazarus pit to resurrect, and we get, a batarang to the face. I don't really like working without Ra's al Ghul. You ever work for Mr. Freeze? 3 guesses what my answer to working with Mr. Freeze is. Who's got a dad pun? What do you think? Yeah, he's chill? Okay. He's a cool guy to work for? He frost bites. The dad jokes empower me. Firefly? Yeah, he thinks he's pretty hot stuff. I know otherwise. What's it like working for Scarface? Who's Scarface? He's a ventriloquist guy who's got a ventriloquist dummy who kind of talks like Bugsy Malone from a 1930s movie. How is Batman in the Justice League with these as his villains? That's a schizophrenic. Give him some olanzapine and group therapy. Scarface goes away. Superman and Martian Manhunter fought a sentient sun. We're gonna bring Batman along. Why? Well, he's paying for the plane tickets. He's gonna throw a batarang at it. It's so cute, you guys. He's fought Darkseid. He's fought Mongol. He's a billionaire, you guys. He's so helpful. He has a car shaped like his head. Batman. Here's why we need workplace protections. When workers receive sufficient pay raises, health improves dramatically. Rates of child neglect and teen pregnancy collapse, as does underage alcohol consumption and drug use. Kids and teenagers don't need to mule and run drugs across neighborhoods to feed themselves. When you give poor people adequate income, not just to save, but to use on a Friday night or a weekend at a convention, when you give them something else to do besides be home and bored, you lower graffiti, they don't have to hustle drugs on the side, and they don't have to just break stuff because they're bored. Invest in the community, and the community becomes safer. White people figured this out the moment they start to live in segregation, the moment suburbia's popped up, and they started just drawing their election districts and school districts. We live on this side of the street, those live on that side of the street. They don't get to come here. To quote Poverty in America, again by Matthew Desmond, a higher minimum wage is an antidepressant. It is a sleep aid, a stress reliever. Vocal segments of the American public, those with brain space to spare, seem to believe that the poor should change their behavior to escape poverty. Get a better job, stop having children, make smarter financial decisions, have my parents be shot in Crime Alley like I did. In truth, it's the other way around. Economic security leads to better choices. This is how we invest in the community. Sorry, I was about to call it the U.S. criminal justice system. It's not. It's the citizen re-traumatization system. Just so it looks better on the insurance papers. We got off easy in the last 40 minutes. I danced around the inherent racism that is our history, our policy, and delivery of social services. But now we get to get angry. Now we get to put on our own bat or animal-shaped face and start swinging back. We get angry, that means we get brave. We are meant to be the great social experiment, a nation without preset social stratas. Well, we're 250 years into it, and we struggle with that. In 2019, the medium white household had a net worth of $188,200. That's okay. That's definitely a house in Pennsylvania or across many red states. That looks pretty okay. So 2019, the medium household income or wealth of a black family, there's a 2 in it, and there's a 6. This has been growing, this gap, more in the last 20 years since the 2008 financial collapse, and I won't have it anymore. We are punishing and weaponizing our poorest into scaring our middle class to defer to the richer class. We did it outside of the Lancaster Square, putting a cop car by homeless people asking for food. We are weaponizing our poorest to scare our middle class into giving anything they can to the uppers. Please, Amazon, take my data and ship me more ammo to my house in case I see an immigrant. That 9-year-old can be snippy. It's what my Italian grandparents would have wanted when they came over to Ellis Island. Officer, help, I see a bored teenager in the park who happens to be black, and it makes me scared because of the media and the news I'm consuming, and of course I'm not gonna walk up and ask how his day is. He might judge me or put me on the TikTok. The war on drugs started in the 90s, and it carried over from all of the goals of the 1960s. It enforced weapon possession and marijuana and psychedelic prison sentences, which is amazing when you consider how many more deaths are connected to alcohol. Rate of suicides increased, car accidents increased, gun violence, violence at the home or otherwise. But you know what alcohol has had for the last 200 years? Better marketing. So that has to stay in the home. It makes the numbers happier. A Long Island police officer that I once served alongside when we were doing the vaccination site at Project Gotham Shield in New York City said that, you know, in 30 years of drug busting, I've had one fight over weed. It was two drunk men challenging each other over who could roll a better joint. The war on drugs was the war on black families and black men. Slap them till they get desperate enough to strike back and then punish them when they react. And so you can film it on cops on Friday night. Scary. 30 years later, 2 generations of black households have been denied fathers. Akira Toriyama just passed a couple weeks ago. That was where I got my projected father figures. When I was a school social worker, every boy I talked to, they knew who Vegeta, Goku, and Piccolo were. They were role models of what strength looked like, of what personal gains and handling consequences looked like. We made policy disrupting families. I'm going to show you 2 maps. One is Chicago in 2010. Racial demographics. Each black spot that you see is a public school that closed between 2000 and 2010. I want you to look at the cluster of the blue dots representing the black citizens and the cluster of green dots that represent the Latino population. I want you to take a look at the map on the right. 10 years later, this is 2021, the rate of homicide per 1,000 citizens. Public schools were shut down. Early education interventions shut down. Remaining schools, they got strained, they got cramped. No teacher could handle a classroom that went from 20 to 40 in 2 years. Remaining schools, they got strained, underfunded, pressure cookers of stress, bus routes got reduced. Food deserts, desperation grows. Nobody moves out of their district because they're living paycheck to paycheck. Definitely not a stressor. And to quote my statistic professor, Dr. Herschel Knapp, there are no old gangsters. They don't age out of it. They just get replaced, except for maybe Snoop Dogg and Old Dirty Bastard. And in 1853, Illinois lawmakers, 2 guesses what color they were, introduced the Black Law in the state of Illinois. 1853. The Black Law allowed stopped recently freed slaves from the South, because this is after the Civil War, from entering the state of Illinois and staying there. They would have to pay a tax if they stayed there for more than 10 days. This passed. Crime Alley, a street in Gotham City, definitely named by the Wayne family, is full of victims of policy. Poverty is inherited the way that wealth can be. Cities in the Northeast are far more segregated than cities in the South. New York City, the most segregated city in the US. And I fight that, and I despise that, and I'm not going anywhere. I want you to take a deep breath, manually unclench your buttholes. I'm angry too. That's why I'm standing like this. I'm angry at the lost scientists and doctors and writers and teachers we lost to poverty. The US population disproportionately comes from Black and Latino neighborhoods. I wonder why they're always put there. 2 million people, 2.2 million people are held in our federal prisons. We have the largest across the developed world. We have more prisoners than China and Russia combined. Why are we trying to win that? Why don't we win better movies? We're working on it. Batman once said, criminals are a superstitious bunch. Oh, criminals. You mean people like dads who acted out of desperation and strained public resources? Someone grew up watching Cops on Friday night on Fox for 32 years. People are so often pipelined from a minor offense into prison because prisons and running prisons have been outsourced to private companies. Private companies, they don't work on qualitative delivery of goods, they work off of a profit. So don't be surprised if prisons are flipping to fill cells and tables like restaurants during a busy brunch session, because they make more money that way. People are often given plea bargains for crimes that both parties know they didn't commit. But going to trial will take too long. So the deal is, you can sign here and you'll get only 3 years in prison, or you can wait for your trial and we'll have eyes on you for any minor infringement. for the federal mandated sentence of 30 years. 3 years, 30 years, hey, it's up to you. We all want to go home, and I think you want to see your children grow up. America. My professor of public policy at Wurzweiler University, Simon Jaffe, said to me while I was interviewing him for this project, 600,000 people are released from prison every year. Within 3 years, 2/3 of them are back in. 600,400 are back in 3 years. That's a terrible statistic, assuming you cared. The worst part is that we put them back into the same neighborhood. Now, in my experience, reintegration is the same thing as recovery, like from substance abuse. Many coming out have drug issues, mental health issues. Half of the prison population has a huge mental health issue that really should have been nipped in the bud so earlier, but no one did, no one cared. Many coming out have drug issues, mental health issues, inherited and experienced trauma from the man dressed as the bat who swung in through the window one night and interrogated daddy over the mac and cheese during the dinner hour, and they don't know any other lifestyle. They haven't dealt with other ways to cope with the thing that they need to dull. So now comes the second judo flip of the lecture. We're gonna go full Batman on this. What if we saw repeated offending citizens as trapped by the same environments that our chemically addicted family members are facing? What if the same practices that reduce drug use are applied to the fear-inspired need to commit crime? Let's talk about Arkham Asylum. Let's talk about treating repeated prison sentences as recovering from an addiction, okay? One possible practice, a mental health court. A board of mental health specialists who review a case of soon-to-be-released citizens, and they get received and help when they get back out. For example, an ACT team, ACT, Assertive Community Treatment Team. What if they get reviewed? Remember the veterans in Utah? What if they just started with housing in a locked door away from the neighborhood that only gave them Valium and fentanyl to get through the night? There are so many episodes of Batman the Animated Series where the villain gets released out of Arkham Asylum and he's thrown back into society, and by the end they're relapsing, they're putting back on the tights, they're yelling about vengeance, and they're playing to their old coping strategies. Arkham Asylum and Gotham don't have professionals looking out for these repeated offenders. So they're just gonna let it stew and let it get even worse. And at some point, the Mad Hatter is gonna take a liking to that cute barista and eventually get like knocked off or knocked out, or like, I just work here, I'm not interested in dating you. He's gonna get mad, he's gonna put on his mind control hat, and he's gonna take a Tommy gun. And if someone just checked in on him once a week and asked how it was going and validated some social contact, maybe the mind control hat goes away for a little bit longer. Maybe the Riddler just gives like a direct answer once in a while. The best episode of that, by the way, is Harley Quinn's. I too had a bad day once. It's Les Miserables. It's the first 10 minutes of Les Miserables. No wonder Jean Valjean abandons the system and fakes his own death to start over. When we strip prisoners of their humanity, we breed monsters out of family members. If you invest early in identifying severe mentally ill individuals and normalizing getting help or asking for help, medication, therapists, social support groups, because mental illness grows when ignored. That's the metaphor of the last 4 Disney movies. The actual villain is inherited trauma. The actual defeat of the villain is things are different now, Grandma, we can be safe. According to the Treatment Advocacy Center, 30% of all family homicides, 30%, are caused by mentally ill family members. I wouldn't applaud that statistic myself. There are people with bipolar or borderline or schizophrenia. An estimated 50% of mass homicides are related to serious mental illness that was not checked in. The longer you wait to diagnose and start medication, the harder it is to treat, the more resistant it becomes, the more frequent they are hospitalized and put through a cycle. Scarface, the Mad Hatter, the Joker, again and again and again, and we hold the power to change this and to treat our citizens who have served their time. We got this time-wise. Manually, unclench the buttholes. If that's the sound it makes, get checked out. My professor, Simon Jaffe, he ran a study which treated recurring incarcerations with the same technique as people's with chemical addictions. It paves the path to rehabilitation. So, rather than shame labeling and the binary of addict versus good person, criminal versus person, we recognize that rather than bad people, they are survivors who made mistakes and deserve more. Relapse is part of recovery. What if relapse was just a part of the cycle? What if you had the internal mechanisms to forgive yourself? I'm putting on the mind control helmet, I'll show you. You don't need the mind control helmet, but it does make me feel safe. I'm gonna go talk to my dad again. Batman is one man. A man who fights crime reactively. The crime has to happen, and then Batman gets to investigate. But the harm's already been done. But a supported Gotham City, an empowered Gotham City could fight crime proactively. It's not as sexy, it doesn't look as good for the cameras, but we are doing it across smaller cities, and we're doing it across larger nations, and we're going to keep this going because we deserve more. According to the Arrowverse, a Batarang costs $1,000 to make. Y'all played Arkham Asylum? How many did you just willy-nilly throw across? How many thousands of dollars did you just leave on the cafeteria floor because you had to be the Bat? Let's imagine instead of throwing $1,000, Batman gave the cost of a Batarang to every citizen in Gotham City. No, that's too much. He wouldn't be a billionaire anymore. Just one neighborhood in Gotham City. No, that's too much, because then he'd only be a minor billionaire. Just one high-rise apartment. One high-rise apartment complex, $430,000 checks every month. That's safe. Ooh. What if every child, parent, grandparent knew they would receive $1,000 a month? What would you do? What would you do if you had $1,000 extra a month? $1,000 extra a month. Would you save for a vacation? Would you willingly pay back for a student debt? Would that cover most of your streaming and most of your convention passes through the year? $1,000 a month? Would you look for a new car? Would you start investing in something new? If you knew $1,000 was always coming in, would you finally test out what acai and kale taste like? What would you do with $1,000? Put it to you. $1,000 a month comes in unquestionably. What do you get to spend it on? Yeah, wouldn't that be great for rent? Because then that's a huge subsidy, because then everything that you make stays with you. If you give money to the poor, they have to use it. And the less they have, the more they have to use it. When you give it to people that already have, it's going to go over here for a rainy day that never comes unless they engineer it with a giant weather machine. That's the micro. That's helping one person individually. That's getting them both their SNAP and their TANF benefits. What about the bat plane, which I've made fun of for the last hour and a half? $46 million. A helicopter costs $200,000. If you broke apart the cost of the bat plane, you have 115 electric buses that can run to new neighborhoods, or more school buses, or 130 EMS vehicles. Who needs 130 EMS vehicles? Let's go half. Let's do 75 and 75 apiece. 6,500 ACT teams, ACT teams, that can check in on recently incarcerated and released possible psychotic people who could commit more crime in the future, and check in and just go, you feeling okay? You want to go for a walk? How'd you feel this week? To be touched in, to build a society and human compassion where it wasn't before, or citywide pre-K, or after-school programming. This is the macro. This is what happens when you decide to fuel the society and fuel the place that you live in. Because if you fuel the place around you, you get to feel safe. Imagine. Because if you tax wealth, do you know what the wealthy become? Still the richest people. Still the richest people. It is asking Bruce Wayne, who is worth $9 billion, if I ask for 0.5% of that. It's the equivalent of asking someone with $100 to give 50 cents. There is an episode of Harley Quinn where the Joker runs for mayor of Gotham on Bernie Sanders' platform. It is fantastic because Lex Luthor puts out a hit on him because the Joker asked for a 1% tax increase on hidden evil layers to go to community schools. And everyone's down for that except Lex Luthor. And so, crime fighters, what do you do? Here's how we inoculate ourselves against future generations from poverty. One is recognizing that the consequences of decades of policy are ours to fix. And they can be fixed through local movements, becoming larger national movements. We do it every year when we fund a nonprofit. We're doing it tomorrow at the charity auction for Extra Life. So what do? Because every statistic on poverty and crime is a family shattered and a tear wiped away. You vote whenever teachers and administrators and social workers run for public office, the people who know how to get stuff done and see a system that failed. You stop voting in business managers. Business managers are Bryce Juniors who are surrounded by yes men, and that's their expectation. This should run like a profit. That's the danger. When the moral problem with investing in private money for public goods, healthcare, education, transportation, environmental upkeep, prisons, you're now rewarded for not quality of delivery of services, but profit margins that only help the company. Suddenly, insulin, which costs pennies to make, costs hundreds of dollars, and the Scarecrow could become a billionaire overnight if he pumps all of his fear toxin into the city's water supply, and then he sells the antidote on the streets for hundreds of dollars in vending machines. That's called the Sackler family maneuver. The Scarecrow's a villain, but he didn't spend 20 years inventing and perpetuating the opioid epidemic. You need oversight. You need to fund oversights. We talked about the IRS earlier, and that's the thing. This is what it takes to build the micro society, and they agree with me. They should. How do you help? It's not enough to go for equality. Equality is everybody gets an egg for breakfast. Everybody gets an egg for breakfast. I'm vegan. I'm allergic. Well, crap. Equity is the same outcome. Everybody gets breakfast for free. Everybody has choices based on dietary restrictions, based on religious views of food, based on what their doctor has said. So not everybody gets to start with a bag of Takis and Cooler Ranch Doritos. Some might get oatmeal, some might get fruit, but everyone starts the day with calories to work the brain. But then there's also the question, why does there have to be a fence to begin with? Who put the fence there? Are they still around to defend it? Mr. Wayne, tear this wall down, mofo. Freedom means options. It means funding social services. Equality is everyone gets the same, treated the same. That's a great start. But folks get left behind. If your goal is everyone graduates from school, some kids are going to need an IEP, and God bless the teachers and workers that make that happen. Because not everyone is ready for a Scantron test. Not everyone's brain thinks that way. Think of all of the doctors and creative types that struggled in school, that find themselves when given the opportunity and the freedom to find how their brain and hearts work. Liberation looks like food banks at churches. They are parades. They are affordable options between the bus or the taxi, not whole paycheck into. They are parks open to families. Step by step, this is how you can eliminate poverty in 2 to 3 generations. This is the macro of what it takes. Fear of criminals, or is it recovery of citizens? Because a funded community is a safe community. A united city is a safe city. A family with hope is a powerful family. The end of poverty is something to stand for, to march for, to sacrifice for. Because poverty is the dream killer, the capacity destroyer, the great waster of human potential. It is a misery and a national disgrace, and that belays any claim to our greatness. We are fighters. We are Americans. We fight bad things. We just made it really easy to put what bad labeled on for other people. And when we ran out of others, seems that we told ourselves to put it on ourselves. I'm telling you not to leave here in love with your fellow citizen. I'm telling you to leave here in hate of the policies that made you lose a family member to an opioid epidemic, or a parent who lost their house, or a family member who still cannot pay off those student loans. What do you do to organize against this? You do what Batman does, and you fight it. I can be found on Instagram at Uncle Yo Anime Therapist on Instagram. I'm also going to upload this onto the YouTubes later. Tonight, I have the honor of hosting your cosplay masquerade. It will be very different from this because it is going to be a very fun time because I love every masquerade and every parent that participates and every student that gets up on stage and shows it off. Cosplay is a wonderful manifestation of showing the Superman within, and that is the empowerment that I hope to give to you all. These are the works cited. I actually made it under 90 minutes. Thank you, Zenkaikon. Thank you all.